I turned 31 the day my mother said those words, the words that set the rest of my life on fire. The kitchen was too quiet, the cake too small. It was one of those store-bought things with the icing already cracking and a single candle that tilted like it, too, was tired. I'd brought it myself. Of course I had. Mom hadn't remembered, not really. But I still hoped. The candle flickered uncertainly as I leaned in to blow it out, the silence pressing in around us like a weighted blanket. That's when she whispered it, as if she was handing me a sacred truth. "You're just jealous of your sister." I froze. The words hit like a slap, quiet, but stinging. I pulled back from the cake, the breath still trapped in my chest, and looked at her. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Her attention was already drifting to the television, where a rerun of some dated sitcom chuckled on. "Then let her pay your bills," I said, my voice suddenly sharp, the edge honed by years of swallowing my own words. And just like that, I rose from the table, walked to my room, and picked up my phone. A few taps and it began. I canceled the auto payments on the electricity. Then the credit cards. Then the rent. My name was on every account. My income had been the silent foundation of their comfort for nearly a decade. I'd done it all, quietly, obediently. Because that's what the less loved daughter does. She covers the cracks, smooths the edges, and makes excuses for everyone else's bad behavior. Not anymore. That night, I didn't cry. That surprised me. I expected tears, or at least that old dull ache that clung to me after every family slight. But instead, there was only clarity. Cold, clean, and unfamiliar. Like stepping into winter air after being shut up in a musty room. I remembered when it started how my sister could do no wrong. Sienna, with her effortless beauty and charm. Sienna, whose mistakes were excused and whose triumphs were magnified. I could line a whole wall with my quiet accomplishments, honors degrees, job promotions, late-night rescues when their credit card was declined. But all anyone ever talked about was Sienna's Instagram art show or her new boyfriend who played the guitar badly but looked good doing it. Mom always said I was the strong one. Funny how strong became synonymous with expendable. But I am not a utility. I am not a backup generator. I am not a silent funder of their lives. They would find that out soon enough. And in the silence that followed the cancellation of those payments, I finally heard something beautiful. My own voice, the next morning arrived in a hush, but not the peaceful kind. The kind just before a storm breaks loose. I sat at my kitchen table, drinking coffee from a chipped mug I hadn't replaced because I always sent my extra money home. It tasted different now. Stronger. Like I'd finally brewed it for myself. My phone vibrated at 7:12 a.m. sharp. Call from Mom. I didn't answer. I let it ring, the way I used to let myself be interrupted mid-meal or midlife for her needs, her panics, her endless "have you seen what Sienna posted?" moments. At 7:45, a text arrived. The power is out. Did something happen with the bill? Oh, something happened all right. By noon, there were 5 missed calls and 3 messages, each escalating in tone. From concern, to confused, to accusatory. The last one read, "We're your family. How could you do this to us?" I laughed, a dry, quiet sound that startled even me. The way they twisted the blade, even now, always astonished me. How could I do this to them? There were decades of moments that flashed in my mind like a cruel slideshow. Me working double shifts to send money while Sienna spent her days painting butterflies and getting featured on lifestyle blogs. Me deferring grad school because Sienna's braces are so expensive. Me sitting through family dinners where Sienna's every doodle was celebrated while my promotions were met with "that's nice, dear." Family. What a loaded word. I hadn't been cruel. I didn't scream. I didn't set fire to their house or write some dramatic letter. All I did was stop. I stepped back. I gave them what they always claimed to want, a world that revolved around Sienna alone. Let them try that world on for size. At 5:02 p.m., another message arrived. This one was from my father. We hadn't spoken much in years. He mostly existed in the background, echoing my mother's opinions with the occasional grunt of agreement. His message simply said, "You've made your point. Now fix it." I didn't respond. Because they were wrong. I hadn't made a point. I'd made a choice. And choices have consequences. 3 days passed. 3 full days of silence on my end, something entirely foreign to them. I had been their fallback, their fixer, their lifeline. And now, nothing. On the 4th morning, I went for a walk. It was crisp outside, the sky a soft gray veil. I noticed things I'd never allowed myself time to appreciate before: the curve of branches against the sky, the way frost kissed the edges of leaves. Beauty, quiet and unnoticed, like I had always been. My phone buzzed again. "Sienna is crying," the message read. It was from my mother, of course. Her weapon of choice, guilt disguised as concern. I imagined Sienna crying, and instead of sympathy, I felt something unexpected: freedom. For years, I'd dried her tears, absorbed her tantrums, and made excuses for her failures. She was the family's glass doll, and I was the shelf she stood on, strong, invisible, necessary. Now the shelf had stepped away. That afternoon, I received a call from my Aunt Linda. She was the only relative who had ever really seen me, really listened. She had once slipped me cash at a family dinner with a whispered, "For your future. Don't tell your mother." I answered her call. "Madison," she said gently. "They're panicking. They don't understand what's happening." I said nothing at first, letting the silence speak for me. "They keep saying you're being dramatic, that you've lost your mind," she continued. "But I told them, finally told them, you've been the one holding everything together for years. And maybe you just got tired." Tears welled up, hot and fast. I wasn't used to being defended, not out loud. "Thank you," I whispered. "You don't owe them your life," she said. "You never did." That night, I sat in the soft light of my apartment, a playlist humming quietly in the background, and began writing. Not for anyone else, for me. I wrote every sacrifice, every insult cloaked in sweetness, every time they dismissed my exhaustion, because Sienna needed more. I wrote until my hand cramped and my heart slowed to a steady rhythm. It was the beginning of something. I was still missing from their world. But for the first time, I was showing up in mine. I started noticing it years ago, how I disappeared from our family photos, even when I was standing right there. At holidays, I'd be off to the side, half cropped out or obscured by someone else's smile. In frames on the mantel, Sienna was everywhere. Baby Sienna with her first tooth. Teen Sienna holding a trophy. Adult Sienna posing in Italy, Paris, Bali. My photos were there too, but only the ones I took behind the camera, never the subject. Now, scrolling through Mom's social media feed, I realized they hadn't even mentioned me in their anniversary post. Celebrating 30 years of love, laughter, and family, the caption read. A collage of smiles. Mom, Dad, Sienna, even her dog. Know me. In a way, I'd been erased long before I chose to vanish. But I remembered the moments no one had captured. Like the night the water heater burst, and I stayed up wringing towels while Mom complained about Sienna's broken nail. Or when I gave up my trip to Costa Rica to help cover the down payment on Sienna's first art studio, because it's not like you were going with anyone special, Madison. Or every birthday that slipped by with nothing more than a text, while Sienna's were extravaganzas with champagne and catered charcuterie boards. I had been loyal to a fault. Now, they were left with their curated smiles, their illusion of family. And I had silence. But in that silence, something had begun to grow. Self-respect. It didn't come crashing in like a storm. It arrived like a breeze through a cracked window, small, fresh, undeniable. The studio apartment I once saw as temporary now felt like sacred ground. It was barely 500 square feet, but it was mine. No one else's name on the lease. No passive-aggressive notes about dishes in the sink. No tension thickening the air. Just me and, for the first time, peace. I started rearranging the space. Not to impress anyone, but to reflect me. I put up art prints I'd always loved but kept in storage because they clashed with the family aesthetic. I painted one wall deep forest green, the kind of color Mom would have called too moody. But I liked how it held the light like a secret. One corner became my writing nook, with a second-hand desk and a thrifted lamp. Another was for music, my old keyboard finally out of its box, the one I bought in college but never played because there was always something else more pressing. In the kitchen, I began cooking for one, not reheating leftovers or grabbing something on the way to help someone else. Real cooking, with recipes I tore from magazines, food I actually wanted to eat. Not diet dinners or family meals dictated by someone else's tastes. Each choice, no matter how small, felt revolutionary. It wasn't just a home I was building. It was a relationship with myself. And in the quiet, I could finally hear her. The version of me that had been waiting, patient, hopeful, and persistent. The one who had always known she deserved more. The one who refused to believe her worth was tethered to how much she could endure or how well she could support others. I spoke aloud to her one evening, hands wrapped around a mug of lavender tea. "I'm sorry I ignored you for so long," I whispered. She forgave me instantly. Of course she did. She knew what it was to be overlooked. And she was just glad to finally be seen. It took a week before the next storm rolled, and this time, in the form of a group text titled Family Check-in. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. The irony nearly made me laugh. Now they wanted to check in. The message was short but loaded. "Dad, let's have a family meeting this Sunday. Everyone. No exceptions. We need to talk this out." I felt my stomach twist. The guilt reflex kicked in hard. Decades of being the peacemaker, the fixer, the one who soothed everyone's bruised egos. But then I remembered. No one had asked how I was doing. Not once. Still, curiosity tugged at me. Would they listen this time? Would they finally hear me? I agreed to attend, not out of obligation, but to see just how far I had come. Sunday arrived with that tight-lipped tension only family gatherings can carry. Their house looked the same, familiar, yet foreign. Like a stage set from a play I no longer wanted a part in. Sienna was already there, draped in soft pastels like a curated Instagram post, sipping tea like she was hosting a brunch instead of a reckoning. "Madison," Mom said, forcing a smile. "You look tired. Are you eating enough?" There it was. The first cut. Camouflaged as concern. "I'm eating fine," I said evenly, taking a seat. Dad cleared his throat, the patriarchal signal for everyone pay attention. "We've been a family a long time," he began, as if we were strangers at a boardroom table. "But this behavior, the sudden abandonment, the financial damage." "Damage?" I interrupted, voice calm but edged in steel. "You mean the money I stopped giving? The bills I stopped covering? That damage?" Silence. Sienna looked uncomfortable. For once, her wide eyes didn't plead for sympathy. They blinked with something like realization. "I've spent years sacrificing for this family," I continued. "Not once did anyone ask what it was costing me." "You never said anything," Mom whispered. "Because every time I tried, you said I was being dramatic. Or jealous. Or selfish." I stood then, heart thudding but steady. "I didn't come here to be guilt back into servitude. I came to let you know the old version of me is gone. The one who accepted crumbs and called it a feast. I'm not asking for understanding. I'm done asking for anything." And with that, I walked out. Not with slamming doors or raised voices, but with dignity. With the grace they never gave me. Outside, the air was cold and fresh. Each step away felt lighter. The door didn't slam behind me. It clicked, soft, final. Walking back to my apartment that evening, I passed by a park where children laughed from swings, their voices bouncing like echoes against the cold sky. I wondered how long it had been since my own laughter rang out that freely. Maybe since childhood. Maybe never. Back in my studio, I exhaled everything I hadn't known I was holding. My coat slipped to the floor. My shoulders followed, sinking into the couch like I was finally allowed to rest. I didn't cry. Not from pain, anyway. I cried from relief. The kind that comes when you realize you no longer owe anyone your silence. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled out my old sketchbook. Once, when I was 12, I had won a citywide art contest with a charcoal drawing of a crumbling house split by a tree growing through its roof. I called it survival. I remember Sienna got mad that week because Mom missed her dance rehearsal to attend the award ceremony. It was the only time my art was celebrated, until Mom apologized to Sienna and said, "We'll let Maddie have her little hobby." I had stopped drawing after that. But tonight, my fingers found the old rhythm. Lines curved, shadows whispered themselves onto the page. I didn't need an audience. This wasn't about being seen anymore. This was about reclaiming all the parts of me that had been boxed up, shelved, or sacrificed. As I sketched, I realized something. Survival had never been the goal. It was time to build something better. Something mine. The next morning, I opened a new document on my laptop and titled it, The Invisible Daughter, a Memoir. Not for them. Not for vengeance. For every girl who sat quietly while the world celebrated someone else's shine. This was my time now. Days passed, and the silence from my family deepened. No more messages. No calls. Not even passive-aggressive memes on Facebook from Mom, which used to be her favorite method of guilt-tripping. A strange kind of peace settled over my days, like a room finally cleared of stale air. At work, my coworkers noticed the change. Amanda, the receptionist who had seen me through more lunch breaks than I cared to count, paused beside my desk. "You're glowing," she said. I looked up from the spreadsheet. "I'm what?" "Glowing. Like, less haunted." She grinned. "Did you finally dump that emotional load you were carrying around?" I laughed, not because it was funny, but because she wasn't wrong. Later that evening, I went to an open mic night alone. It wasn't something I would have done before. Going places by myself always felt too vulnerable, like it highlighted my aloneness. But this time, I didn't feel alone. I felt whole. The host, a tall woman in denim overalls with a voice like honey over gravel, called my name from the list. Madison Reynolds. I almost didn't go up. Almost. But then I did. The lights were warm, the mic cold in my hand. I read a piece from the Memoir in Progress. Just 3 minutes of truth, nothing fancy. Just the story of a girl who grew up trading herself piece by piece for scraps of approval. When I finished, the room was quiet. Then someone clapped. Then another. It wasn't thunderous applause, it was something quieter, deeper. Recognition. Afterward, a woman with silver hair and bright green eyes approached me. "I felt that," she said. "I've lived that." We hugged without names, just two women stitched from the same invisible thread. And for the first time, I knew I wasn't just surviving. I was being seen. Not by my family, but by something better. By myself. One morning, 2 weeks after the family summit, I received a small envelope in the mail. No return address. The handwriting on the front looked like my father's, firm, upright, no nonsense. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it, unsure what to expect. Inside was a single typed note. "We hope you'll reconsider your actions. It's not too late to fix what's been broken. Dad." No apology. No acknowledgement. Just another veiled command wrapped in concern. I read it 3 times, hoping, somewhere between the lines, to find something tender. Something real. But there was nothing. They hadn't learned a thing. I folded the letter, not to save it, but to bury it in a box labeled Lessons. That afternoon, I called my bank and removed the last of their authorized access. My accounts. My name. My future. Later, I returned to the memoir. The words flowed more freely now, no longer clogged by self-doubt or fear. I wrote about the birthday when they sold my car. About Christmases where Sienna's gifts sparkled and mine looked like an afterthought. I wrote about the time I got sick and no one noticed because Sienna had a cold and needed soup. Each memory on the page became a brick in the foundation I was laying for myself. This wasn't revenge. This was resurrection. That night, I dreamed of a dinner table. Not the one I'd grown up around, with its uneven chairs and unequal love, but a round one, filled with strangers who looked like family, smiling with mouths full of questions I'd always wanted to be asked. And in that dream, when I spoke, no one interrupted. IT began subtly. One by one, I removed them, not out of spite, but necessity. Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Their names disappeared from my followers and friend lists. No more silent scrolling through curated vacations and feigned perfection. No more heartache disguised as digital connection. I didn't announce it. I didn't rage or write a manifesto. I just unplugged. There was something sacred about the quiet. The freedom to post a photo of my breakfast without wondering if mom would comment, "That looks expensive, hope you're budgeting." Or if Sienna would like it just to remind me she was watching. In their absence, something remarkable happened. My world got louder. I started to hear from people I'd lost touch with, old coworkers, college friends, even a woman named Marisol from the diner I used to work at in high school. "I always admired your work ethic," she wrote. "I hope you're finally doing something for you." I cried after reading that. Not because it hurt, but because someone saw what my family never could. Later that week, I attended a networking brunch for women in entrepreneurship. I was nervous. I wasn't a business owner yet, but I had an idea, and more importantly, I had space in my life now to pursue it. They passed around the mic at the end, asking everyone to share a goal. When it was my turn, I took a breath. "My name is Madison," I said, voice shaking just enough to make it real. "And I'm building a life where I don't disappear." The room clapped. I didn't shrink. I grew. IT was a Tuesday afternoon, gray, wet, one of those days where the world feels like it's been dipped in watercolor. I was home, editing chapter 4 of my memoir, when my phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated. Then I answered. "Is this Madison Reynolds?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes. This is Nurse Hale from Mercy General. Your mother was admitted about an hour ago. She listed you as her emergency contact." The words knocked the air from my lungs. Despite everything, I felt my body move. Muscle memory, maybe? The old Madison would have grabbed her coat, rushed out the door, and arrived at the hospital breathless and apologizing, like always. But this wasn't the old Madison. "She has a daughter named Sienna," I said calmly. "Is she there?" The nurse paused. "No, we haven't reached her yet." "I'm not in a position to come," I replied, the words tasting strange and strong on my tongue. "But I hope she's okay." I ended the call. Then I sat down, hands trembling not from guilt, but from the sheer unfamiliarity of choosing myself. 10 minutes later, another call. "Sienna." I didn't answer. A text followed. "I can't believe you're doing this. She's your mother." I stared at the message. Yes, she was. She was also the woman who used my savings to fund Sienna's apartment and called it helping the family. The woman who told relatives I was just going through a phase every time I tried to assert independence. I didn't respond, because this wasn't a moment for performance. It was a reckoning. I made tea. I returned to my manuscript. And for the first time, the silence that followed didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like arrival. A week passed after the hospital call, and I heard nothing. No updates. No apologies. Just silence from the same voices that once demanded my every breath. Then the lawyer's letter came. I recognized the firm, Dad's old college friend. It was formal, but the message was clear. As your mother begins to arrange her estate, you are encouraged to attend a preliminary family meeting regarding assets and inheritance. I read it twice and laughed, not out of humor, but in disbelief. After all the years they insisted I needed nothing, after all the lectures about not being money-minded, like Sienna, they now wanted me in the room where decisions were made. Maybe they feared I'd fight. Or maybe, deep down, they knew I was no longer their silent pillar. I didn't go. I sent a reply via email. I have no interest in participating. Please remove me from any future correspondence related to the estate. It felt like shutting a door I had waited my whole life to walk through. But the truth? That door had been locked from the inside for years. They just didn't notice when I stopped knocking. I treated myself to a quiet dinner that night. The restaurant wasn't fancy, but it had linen napkins and soft jazz. I brought a book, not for distraction, but as company. The waiter asked, "Will someone be joining you?" I smiled. "No, just me." He nodded, respectful, and brought me a glass of wine that paired with the moment. I watched people toast birthdays, anniversaries, little triumphs. And I toasted too. To silence that doesn't hurt. To freedom that doesn't ask for permission. To building a life not defined by what I was denied, but by what I'm finally claiming. They say when the scapegoat leaves the family, everything falls apart. I didn't believe it at first. I thought I was just a piece they'd replace, another function they'd delegate, another resource they'd reroute. But weeks after my withdrawal, the cracks began to show. Amanda, the same cousin who once rolled her eyes at my practicality, reached out on Instagram. "Hey, random, but have you talked to your mom? Things seem tense over there." I left her on read. Not out of malice, but because I had nothing left to explain. I was the one they blamed when Sienna had a bad day, when the money ran short, when the tension at home was unbearable. I was their lightning rod, the one who drew the fire so they could bask in artificial peace. Now, with me gone, the storm had no place to land. I imagined them sitting around the dinner table, their arguments echoing louder without me there to mediate, absorb, fix. Sienna without her audience. Dad without his quiet accountant. Mom without her fallback daughter. It was never about me causing problems. It was about them refusing to face their own. And now? They had to. I went to the bookstore that Saturday. I wandered through aisles of titles about healing, boundaries, and rebirth. I didn't need a manual, I was living it. But I liked knowing others had walked this path too, and lived to write about it. At the checkout counter, the clerk, a girl barely 20, looked at the cover of one of my selections and said, "That's a good one." Helped me realize I didn't owe my family an explanation. I smiled, heart blooming in a place still tender. "It's funny," I said. "You don't know how much you were holding until you finally put it down." She nodded. It's heavy being the one who always holds it together. I walked home slower than usual, as if time had finally decided to match my pace. They could keep their chaos. I had chosen peace. And peace doesn't beg to be included. It came late, nearly midnight, when the world is quiet and all pretense has gone to bed. A message from Sienna. No emojis. No exclamation marks. Just this. "I didn't know how much you were carrying. I'm sorry." I read it 3 times. Once with disbelief. Once with rage. And once with the kind of grief that curls around the bones. Because the truth is, I'd wanted that apology for years. I'd imagined it in every form, public, private, grand, subtle. I'd scripted responses. I'd rehearsed forgiveness. I'd even prepared myself for never hearing it. But now, after all that silence, here it was. And it didn't feel like redemption. It felt late. Late. Like the birthday parties where I smiled while she blew out candles I bought. Like the family dinners where she basked in praise built from my quiet sacrifice. Like the whispered nights when I sat on the floor, counting out rent money so she could chase her next dream. Late, like everything I had waited for while she lived loud and unburdened. I didn't reply. Not out of bitterness. Out of clarity. This wasn't a conversation. It was a confession. And the thing about confessions is, they're for the speaker, not the listener. I whispered one of my own as I set my phone down. "I forgive you." But forgiveness doesn't mean reunion. Sometimes it means letting go without ceremony. Sometimes it means freeing yourself from the hope that things might still change. And sometimes it means loving someone enough to walk away, even when they finally show up. I started thinking about the word legacy, how in my family, it was always measured in money, status, control. Dad often said, "We don't leave messes behind, we leave something people can be proud of. What he meant was, maintain the image. Keep the facade. Don't let anyone see the rot beneath the wallpaper. But now, as I built my life apart from their expectations, I began to redefine what legacy meant for me. It wasn't property or an inheritance built on guilt. It was presence, honesty, the ability to look at your own reflection without flinching. One morning, I received an email from a small press. They wanted to publish excerpts from my memoir. I had submitted on a whim, half expecting silence. But here it was proof that my story, once buried beneath everyone else's spotlight, was beginning to shine in its own right. The editor wrote, "Your voice is clear and deeply felt. This is the kind of work that changes people." I cried, then laughed, then sat in stunned stillness, staring at those words over and over. I thought about the little girl I used to be, sitting at the edge of the couch while the rest of the family celebrated Sienna's first gallery exhibit. How I clapped quietly, hoping someone would ask about the essay I'd won an award for that same day. No one did. But now, strangers saw me. Readers connected with me. And more importantly, I saw myself. Later that evening, I lit a candle, not for nostalgia, but for intention. I sat with my manuscript, tracing my fingers along the spine of the pages, and whispered, "This is your legacy now." Not obedience, not silence, but truth. One afternoon, as rain etched soft lines down my windows, I printed the full manuscript of my memoir. The pages came alive in my hands, each one carrying a piece of the woman I had become. The woman I had buried for years under duty, guilt, and family performance. I laid them out across my bed, page by page, like puzzle pieces I was finally ready to fit together. There, in ink and silence, was my life. The child who shared everything and received less. The teenager who sacrificed college dreams so someone else could chase theirs. The woman who paid the bills, carried the burdens, and disappeared in every family photo. And finally, the woman who said no. It was strange, this power I now held. Not flashy, not loud, but steady, like the hum of something well-built. I used to think power came with accolades, applause. But now I knew it came with peace. That weekend, I visited a small bookstore that had agreed to carry early copies of my work. I brought a few printed proofs in a cloth tote bag and handed them to the owner, Ruth, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s who wore her glasses on a chain and had a voice like velvet gravel. She thumbed through the first few pages and looked up at me. "This," she said, "is what people need to read." I felt something shift in my chest. A wound closing. A breath I didn't know I was holding finally released. Outside, it was still raining. But it didn't feel cold anymore. As I walked home, umbrella swinging at my side, I passed by a family walking together, 2 daughters between them. One skipping ahead, the other quiet, holding her mother's hand. The mother looked down at the quiet one and smiled. I don't know why it moved me so deeply. Maybe because I never got that smile. But maybe, just maybe, I could be that mother someday. The kind who sees the daughter who walks softly and tells her she's enough. It arrived in a cream-colored envelope, thick and expensive like it was trying to impress me. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable, Mom's elegant script that had once written my name on birthday cards, chore lists, and passive-aggressive notes about cleaning the bathroom. I opened it without ceremony. "You are cordially invited to the Reynolds family reunion, hosted at the Lakeside Inn. June 14th, formal attire requested. RSVP by May 30th. No personal note. No, we hope to see you." Just the same glossy pretense I'd grown up with. A party designed to show how well the family was doing, how united they still appeared, how legacy was being carried forward through curated smiles and careful omissions. It should have made me angry. It didn't. It made me tired. Because I knew what it was really about. My book had started making quiet ripples. A local article had praised it for its intimate power and unflinching honesty. A podcast had asked to interview me. A few of Mom's friends had even commented on the post, asking if it was based on true events. Now they wanted to rewrite the ending. Invite me back into the photo. Stage forgiveness like a family drama with a tidy third act. Show the world that we'd worked through our differences. But I knew better. This wasn't healing. It was PR. I left the invitation on my kitchen counter for 3 days. Then, without much thought, I picked it up, walked to my balcony, and let the wind take it. I watched it dance for a moment, then disappear. And in that moment, I felt light. I didn't need their stage. I had my own story now. And it was unfolding, page by page, exactly as it should. There's a different kind of silence that settles in once you stop waiting for the apology, the recognition, the call. It's not empty, it's melodic. A slow, patient rhythm that lets you breathe in your own time. That's where I live now. I started every morning with a small ritual, coffee in a real mug, not a travel cup, a lit candle on the windowsill, and 10 minutes of stillness. No scrolling, no lists, just breathing. It felt like prayer. One morning, I looked around my apartment and realized I had made this place a sanctuary. Not out of luxury, but intention. Every object had a story I chose. Every color, every book, every piece of furniture reflected a woman who had taken her life back one boundary at a time. My favorite thing in the whole space was the mirror above my writing desk. Not because of the way it looked. It was simple, round, a little tarnished at the edges, but because of what I finally saw in it. Me. Not a version edited for approval. Not a shadow behind someone else's glow. Not a woman reduced to her usefulness. Just me. I smiled into the glass. That evening, I returned to my manuscript, now preparing for final edits. I'd added a chapter titled The Unseen Years, where I laid bare every sacrifice made invisible by someone else's spotlight. It was the most vulnerable chapter I'd written. It was also the most powerful, because naming the truth has always been the first step in claiming freedom. The next day, my editor called. "We think this could go wider," she said, her voice trembling with possibility. "There's something universal in the way you wrote invisibility." I thanked her. Then, after we hung up, I cried. Because for the first time, someone outside my story wanted to carry it forward, not to erase me, not to reshape the truth, but to amplify it. The silence that used to haunt me now felt like the space where music begins. A soft hum, a rising note. A woman becoming IT happened on a Wednesday. I was in the self-checkout line, buying blueberries and almond milk, when a woman tapped me gently on the shoulder. "Excuse me," she said, her voice familiar in a way I couldn't place. When I turned, I recognized her, Mrs. Caldwell, one of Mom's friends from the country club, always impeccably dressed and gently disapproving. "I just finished your book," she said. "Twice, actually." I stiffened, bracing for a veiled insult, a backhanded compliment, a warning to be careful airing family laundry. Instead, her eyes softened. "I always wondered why you were so quiet at those gatherings," she said. "Now I understand. And I'm so sorry." I blinked. I didn't know how to receive kindness from that direction. It felt like finding a flower growing from concrete. "Thank you," I managed. "I gave it to my daughter," she added. "She's been struggling in her own way. Your words helped her feel less alone." The checkout machine beeped, reminding us both of the world spinning around us. "I hope your family understands now," she said, more to herself than to me. I smiled. Not bitter. Not broken. "They don't have to," I replied. "I do." She nodded, then walked away, pushing her cart toward the exit. I stood there a moment longer, hand resting on the blueberries, heart strangely full. Sometimes healing doesn't come from the people who hurt you. Sometimes it comes from those who watched, silently, and finally speak. And sometimes it comes from the quiet voice inside that no longer waits to be rescued. Spring arrived slowly, like a song played in reverse. Buds unfurled on the branches outside my window, hesitant but sure. And with them came moments I used to wish I could share, with a mother who'd listen, a sister who'd understand, a father who'd see. But they weren't there. and I stopped waiting. I walked the city's botanical garden alone one Sunday, weaving between daffodils and early blooming tulips. Couples strolled hand in hand, children darted across the paths, and a breeze carried the scent of things starting over. I paused beside a magnolia tree, its white blossoms wide like open palms. And I whispered, "You've missed so much." Not out of anger, but with a gentleness I never thought I'd find. They missed my first real publishing deal. The interview on a podcast where I talked about healing and choosing self-worth. The art class I started on Tuesday nights, where I paint scenes from memory that no longer hurt to touch. They missed the first time I laughed so hard I cried, just sitting on my balcony with a friend who didn't need me to prove anything. The quiet joy of making dinner just because I wanted to. The way I danced, barefoot in my apartment, when I saw my name in a bookstore window. They missed the woman I became. But I didn't. I witnessed every inch of her emergence. I was there for every scar that faded and every light that returned to her eyes. That night, I made a simple dinner, pasta with garlic and basil, a glass of wine, and ate it slowly, savoring not just the flavor, but the moment. They missed this life. But I didn't. And that is the truest form of justice I've ever known. The studio was quiet, cool, with soft lighting that flattered even the most tired of authors. I sat across from the host of a well-known podcast, reclaiming her voice, a platform for women who had risen from silence, broken patterns, and rebuilt from truth. "You wrote," she began, flipping through the dog-eared pages of my memoir. "It wasn't the absence of love that broke me. It was the presence of conditional love masquerading as devotion." Tell me more about that. I took a breath. Because this wasn't just another quote. It was a bloodline of my story. My family always said we were close, I said. We celebrated birthdays, holidays, all the usual benchmarks. But underneath the surface was this unspoken rule. If I didn't play the role, if I questioned, stepped out of line, stopped sacrificing, then the love would evaporate. She nodded. So what changed? I stopped playing the role, I said simply. And the love did evaporate. But I didn't. That line hung in the air between us. I looked into the camera lens, imagined the people on the other side, women nursing the ache of being the invisible one, the blamed one, the strong one who was never allowed to be weak. I want them to know, I said, that walking away isn't abandonment. Sometimes it's the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and even for them. The host reached over and gently squeezed my hand. After the recording ended, a producer whispered to me, that last line? That's going to echo. I smiled. Not because I wanted to be remembered, but because I had finally spoken words worth remembering. Outside, the air shimmered with late spring sun. The world felt bigger. But I felt just the right size. A friend invited me to her parents' house for dinner, an impromptu gathering full of mismatched plates, laughter, and that kind of welcome that doesn't ask for credentials. I brought a lemon tart, something new I'd learned to bake just for the joy of it. After dinner, I wandered into the living room while they cleaned up, and there it was, a simple mantel lined with family photos. Each picture had a story. A child in a muddy soccer uniform, a graduation cap askew, a couple in their wedding best, mid-laugh. No perfect lighting, no staged poses. Just moments. And at the center, a framed photo of my friend, in paint-smeared overalls, holding a pottery bowl with pride. Mom took that the day I got into art school, she said, appearing beside me. She hated ceramics. Said it made a mess. But she was proud. Something broke open gently inside me. My family had a mantle too, but mine had always been a museum of perfection. Sienna's recital photos, her magazine clippings, awards I had paid for but were never mine. I couldn't recall a single photo of me displayed in that house past the age of 12. And yet, here I was, standing in the warm glow of another family's living room, being fed, welcomed, included, without performance. I excused myself to the bathroom and stood there for a long time, not crying, just breathing, letting the truth settle. They hadn't seen me. but the world still could. And I didn't have to prove anything to be visible. I returned to the table and someone handed me a cup of tea like it was the most natural thing in the world. And for the first time in a very long time. It was .it came months after the first one. No preamble this time. Just a simple, 6-word text from Sienna. Do you miss them? I do. I stared at it for a long while. Do I? There were days when I missed the idea of them, the version I'd built in my head where love was unconditional, where fairness wasn't rationed, where I could simply be without needing to serve. But the real them? I missed being someone they protected. I missed being seen as more than a utility. I missed what I should have had. That's not the same as missing them. I drafted a response, then erased it. Not to be cruel, but because some messages are invitations you don't have to accept. Instead, I wrote in my journal that night. You do not owe your pain a reply. You owe your peace a promise. The next morning, I donated some old clothes and books, things that no longer belonged in my life. I carried them to the donation center like a quiet ceremony, each item a shedding of an old self. Afterward, I walked through a park I used to avoid, one that was too close to the neighborhood where I grew up. This time, I didn't flinch when I passed the turn toward the old house. I didn't look away. I didn't look back. I simply walked on. Because I was no longer haunted by what could have been. I was held by what was becoming. I was leaving a bookstore downtown, arms full of titles about resilience, creativity, and self-trust, when someone called out my name. Madison? I turned slowly. A woman stood there, maybe late 40s, elegant but tired, like she carried more than just her handbag. She approached me with hesitation, eyes scanning my face as if to confirm I was real. I'm sorry, she said. I read your book. I've never reached out to an author before, but I had to. You wrote my life. I smiled, soft and unsure. Thank you. That means more than I can say. She looked away for a second, swallowing whatever emotion had caught in her throat. I have 3 sisters. I was the middle one, the fixer, the one who never asked for anything. And when I finally said no, I lost them all. My heart ached for her and with her. I thought I was the only one, she added. You're not, I said. We stood there, strangers bound by familiar ache, wrapped in a kind of shared mourning that only those who've been erased can truly understand. Your story gave me the courage to start again, she whispered. To stop hoping they'd change and to start changing myself. We hugged like sisters born from the same wound. After she left, I sat on a nearby bench, books heavy in my lap, heart light in my chest. This was the ripple effect of telling the truth. This was what it meant to reclaim your voice not just for yourself, but for every woman still whispering into her pillow, wondering if anyone hears her. I saw her. And now she saw herself. I wrote a letter to my mother that I will never send. Not out of fear, but because I've learned that some things are meant for release, not delivery. It began simply, "Dear Mom," and then unfolded into the things I've always wanted to say. I told her how I used to watch her from the kitchen doorway, how I'd memorized the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, hoping she'd look up and notice I had the same gesture. I wrote about the time she left me at school an hour past dismissal because Sienna had a dentist appointment. I never mentioned it back then. I just waited quietly. I was always waiting. I told her how I folded my dreams like origami, small, intricate, delicate, and tucked them into drawers so hers could fly. I wrote, "You taught me to be good, not whole. But I have chosen wholeness now." I didn't write in anger. I wrote like a woman planting seeds in a garden she would never visit, simply because something beautiful still deserved to grow. When I finished, I folded the letter and placed it in a box with other things I've outgrown, old beliefs, worn-out apologies, stories that once defined me but no longer fit. I lit a candle beside it. Not for mourning. For gratitude. Because even pain can be a teacher. And hers had taught me how to become someone who chooses herself, not as a rebellion, but as a birthright. This year, I planned my own birthday. No whispered reminders. No waiting to see if someone remembered. No shrinking expectations to fit the size of other people's attention. Just me, a few close friends, and a celebration that felt like a soft revolution. We met at a small coastal inn, nothing flashy, but filled with warm light, fresh flowers, and the scent of something sweet baking in the distance. I wore a dress the color of seafoam and let the breeze tangle my hair without apology. Someone brought a guitar. Someone else brought wine. And someone, a woman I'd only recently grown close to, baked me a lemon cake, saying, "You said you loved citrus." I remembered. I hadn't known what to do with kindness when it wasn't transactional. But that night, I let it in. After dinner, they asked me to make a toast. I stood with a glass of rose in my hand and looked around at the women who weren't family by blood, but by choice, who had shown up not because they needed something from me, but because they saw me. All my life, I've been told I was too quiet, too serious, too much, too little. But this year, I gave myself the thing I always wanted, permission to be exactly as I am. They raised their glasses. To Madison, someone said, and to all the daughters who chose their own names. Later that night, I walked to the edge of the shore alone, the sand cold beneath my feet. And I whispered into the waves, "Happy birthday." And this time, I meant it. Healing isn't linear. It's a tide, sometimes retreating, sometimes crashing. But always, always moving. One morning, I found an old photo tucked in the back of a drawer. It was of me and Sienna, ages maybe 10 and 8, sitting on the porch in matching overalls. I was looking at her mid-laugh. She was looking at the camera. That photo gutted me once. Not because of what it showed, but what it missed. The caption Mom wrote on the back, in faded ink, said Sienna and her best friend. No mention of me. And yet, I kept the photo. Because now I saw it differently. I saw a girl who loved without condition. Who showed up even when she wasn't seen. Who smiled into the background without knowing one day she'd write her way into the foreground. I placed the photo in a new frame, not to honor the past, but to honor her. The girl who survived being invisible. The woman who chose to be seen. Later that day, I met with a book club that had chosen my memoir. They were women of all ages, some tearful, some angry, all raw with recognition. One of them, gray-haired with calloused hands, said, "You wrote what I never had the words for." I thought it was just me. It never is. The most powerful lies are the ones that convince you your pain is an anomaly. But now we were shattering that silence. Together. Afterward, I ran my fingers along the scar on my wrist, an old burn from cooking dinner while everyone else relaxed on the couch. It used to sting. Now it shimmered. Silver. Like proof. Like pride, the email came on a Tuesday afternoon, tucked between junk mail and a sale notification. It was from a women's conference, national, well-known, respected. They were inviting me to be a keynote speaker. The subject line read, "Your story deserves the stage." For a long moment, I just stared at it. Not because I doubted my worth, but because I remembered the girl I used to be, the one who couldn't get a word in at the dinner table, the one whose thoughts were silenced by sighs and better stories. I thought of how many times I was interrupted. How many times I was told, "Not now, Madison," or "Let your sister talk." And now, someone wanted to hand me a microphone and say, "Please, tell us everything." I accepted, of course. The night before the conference, I stood in front of the mirror, rehearsing the opening lines. Not out of nervousness, but reverence. I wanted to do justice to all the women who still felt like footnotes in their own stories. The next day, I stood on that stage, lights warm on my skin, a sea of faces looking back, expectant, ready. I began not with triumph, but with truth. I used to believe that silence was strength. That if I endured enough, one day I'd be rewarded with love, with recognition, with peace. But silence isn't always strength. Sometimes, it's surrender. And I am no longer surrendering. I watched women wipe tears from their cheeks. Heads nodded. Hands reached for hands. By the end, I didn't feel alone. I felt echoed. And when I stepped off the stage, I knew. This voice they had once dismissed? It was my greatest inheritance. One I forged myself, after the conference, after the applause, after the whirlwind of gratitude and shared stories, I returned home to a still apartment. No balloons. No one waiting with cake. Just me, the quiet, and the echo of what I'd just lived. And I felt full. Not in the way I used to crave, full of validation or praise, but full like the sky after rain. Steady. Settled. Clean. That night, I wrote a letter. Not to my family. To myself. Dear Madison, you didn't need to be louder to matter. You didn't need to carry everyone to prove your strength. You didn't need to shrink to fit into their comfort. What you needed was the one thing they never gave you, permission to be whole. And you gave it to yourself. Thank you for choosing the harder path, the one without applause, the one without certainty. Thank you for walking away when staying would have meant disappearing. Thank you for not letting bitterness swallow you whole. For turning pain into poetry, silence into story, absence into architecture. You are no longer a shadow. You are the light. I sealed the letter and tucked it into the back of my journal, behind the chapters that would soon be bound and shelved. Not for closure, but for celebration. That evening, I poured a glass of wine and toasted not to a finished book or a successful speech. I toasted to the girl who had once been overlooked and to the woman who now dances in her own light.